これはわしと虎長様との間のことじゃ。
お前様が私に許さなかったのは死ではござりませぬ。
死ぬがよい。
お前様には手の届かぬ生き方にござりまする。
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Shogun Episode 8. This was another heartbreaking addition to the series that has left me with two certain facts. Toranaga is the coldest man in the entire world, and Ochiba is the only one colder. The episode begins with a defeated Toranaga army marching back to Edo with the white litter carriage containing the body of Nagakado. The army is sunken. Toranaga coughs for some reason that we can only attribute to travel or his mourning, and the clouds are hanging low over all of their heads. This was truly a moment that the great Toranaga could have not planned for, and I think that at its core, that is the purpose of Nagakado's death. Last episode was all about making us forget that Toranaga is this master planner, wielding his fate like a sword, and my goodness, it did a great job of that. That feeling continues through this episode until it seems like he has all but lost it, and then we learn that it truly was a ruse. Before we learn what happens, though, we see them going back to Edo for a customary 49 days of grieving. We have to imagine that Crimson Sky is all but finished, and then we see Yabushige talking to his young squire about the death of Nagakado, saying that dying to a rock is lower than boiling, but higher than being eaten by dogs. Now, on my first watch, I didn't think much of this. It kind of felt like they were just describing a pain scale or something like that, like describing which is the worst way to die in terms of pain, but I would much rather have that than being eaten by dogs or being boiled alive. Both of those are much more terrible. Nagakado's death seems tame compared to either of those. Instead, I think he's creating some kind of guide or ranking for honorable death. His macabre fascination has purpose. He is cataloging death for some reason aside from being a weird little man that likes to listen to people suffer. I wasn't able to find this, but perhaps the person this character is based off of did something similar, wrote like this book that cataloged all the ways that you could die or something like that, the original 1000 ways to die. Like maybe this guide could have helped shape the feudal era norms about the best and worst ways to die while serving your lord, which were cowardly and which were courageous. I think maybe he was the original BuzzFeed creating clickbait for the other samurai. John and Mariko talk about the service that she must honor and the service that he was relieved of. He was given the books that prove his piracy and all that he has done on his journeys, and was granted freedom from the duties that he was appointed. Saiki's men have been ordered to wait for them at the border of Edo, and that is truly such an interesting move. It makes me wonder what the other lords will have to say about it. Like, it feels like the honorable and correct thing to do, but we know that the council is cracking, which then brings us to Lord Ishido and Lady Ochiba discussing Toranaga's defeat. He is ready to celebrate, but a keen eye that could only come from trauma makes her hold off until his head is on their floor. Joking about the trauma thing, kind of. Probably not, but she, much like we, will never forget that the legends of Toranaga have defined him as a trickster, and as this episode shows, rightfully so. They briefly discussed the great Taiko and the honorable stories of who he was, not quite aligning with the reality of who he was to them. The brief moment feels like Lord Ishido really wants to be real with his coworker, like the boss that they have had for the last decade is finally out of earshot and he wants to talk shop, but Ochiba really wasn't having that. Lord Ishido then presses for them to connect further, to solidify the bond between them. He is shooting his shot, and he is getting some cold silence. He wants a marriage to create a strong leading family, but deep down, and not even deep down, she does not want that. To affirm and recap my feelings about Ochiba here, it really feels like she is playing some big brain chess game here, and much like Toranaga does not want to let her pieces known to anybody else but her. I believe she is going to use Lord Ishido as the fall guy for some plan that puts her and her people on top at the very end of this, but it's just about defining who her people are. On the surface, we must imagine that she wants her child to lead, but because we know how terrible that conception was and the hatred that she is kind of harboring for those people, she may just straight up kill this child and put an end to the Taiko's line once and for all. She is a wild card going into what I believe are the final episodes of this series, and I love it. Like, it's not out of the question to consider that she is on the same side as Toranaga, even though the showrunners are doing a great job of showing these two as the final bout that we're kind of building for at the end of the series. It really feels like some twist is coming up, and if it is Ochiba being Toranaga's plan the entire time, fire. Or if it's truly Ochiba just looking out for herself and doing whatever she needs to from her diminished status in this culture as a woman, also fire. Whatever it is, it feels like it is going to be so layered, so complex, and I absolutely love it. We then see Edo, this sprawling new city that Toranaga is proud to be building, as pointed out by Lady Jin last episode. We then see the body of Nagakado being prepared and a mourning friend group that has some rather mixed emotions. It really seems like Buntaro is truly sad here, sharing stories of him as a child with a broken arm and the backwards thinking that told him to hide his injuries to avoid being seen as lesser. Hiramatsu then says that he was an embarrassment, and Yabushige politely laughs and nods. It's really subtle, but this moment is massive for Omi. He has bent the knee to his uncle countless times, but here it feels like he sees him for the fence-sitter that he is. He has no backbone and will agree with whatever opinion keeps him alive. Omi breaks from that here and reinforces his feelings about the loss that was Nagakado dying and the man that put his son and all of them in this position. Toranaga. It is a bold statement that directly says that Toranaga is at fault for the death of his own son. It feels like he is begging to die. Like, it feels like that is a moments in which loyalty is kind of being, like, it's cracking here. A courageous thing to say, and that is exactly why you have never seen that real truth from Yabushige. Also, because Yabushige is kind of a weird middle ground, it feels like Toranaga and Hiramatsu represent the older generation where blind loyalty or faith in your superiors is expected and anything else is not that. Hiramatsu calls his dead friend an embarrassment because that is what his elders and his peers would have said about it. Then the newer generation is Omi and Nagakado, where they have trouble seeing in such black and white terms. Omi wants to question and challenge authority that sours his dead friend. Yabushige is then torn between the older and younger generational mindsets, feeling ungrounded and trying to appease his elders while speaking on behalf of the youth. Truly, this feels like a perfect character, and dependent on how he dies, I will remember him forever, because he is truly out for himself above all else, and that is just kind of not going to fly in this culture. But we can see the conditions that really made this reality, and in no uncertain terms, perfection. He is a fence-sitter, a spineless bitch, and I believe his death will highlight why it is important to believe in something greater than your own selfish needs. Omi is also the voice of reason here, letting us know that they feel this closeness of death, and they can only be so silent now that their remembrances draw ever near. One final note about this scene is, again, Hiramatsu. He is meant to make us remember Toranaga and the long life that comes with trusting that man fully, the benefits you receive when you have loyalty and complete faith. He is living proof that even if you don't know his plan, it all works out, and that should be enough. But Toranaga risks more than his own son's life when he is constantly keeping his true self concealed. These men must have blind faith comparable to God himself, and right now, all they can see is the death march ahead of them. Of course, this brings us to Nagakado's funeral and Toranaga's absence being explained by his mysterious illness that has started during his travels. Of course, we know this is all a part of the narrative they are trying to create and sell the defeated status that Toranaga wears like a mask. Something that I want to point out about the procession here is that it is being led by these three people. We saw people in similar wardrobes during the flashback while Ochiba's father was killing what I believed were the Buddhist monks. I believe these men leading the procession are as well, and I think that is continuing to hint at a more detailed backstory about why Ochiba's father was known as corrupt and why he was murdering monks, and why the corruption with Christianity was allowed to run rampant and become what it did. It feels like we're still due some flashbacks explaining the uprising against the Taiko, and or something that explains Toranaga's relationship with Buddhism in a land that is more and more turning to Christianity. We still don't know why Ochiba's father was killing monks, we do know that Ochiba does have a line to the Christian person here, just saying like, shove God up your ass kind of thing. But we also don't know why Toranaga plotted with Mariko's father to kill him. But I'm assuming I'm really assuming now, like after I wrote and went through this whole video, it all feels like it is connected with these religions, and I cannot wait to learn more about it. Yabushige discusses how the generals of Edo are still wearing their armor as an act of defiance. This was such a great little detail that if it wasn't pointed out directly, it would have meant nothing to me, or most people watching, probably. Hiromatsu says that Yabushige is to march to Osaka alone with the guns and cannons as a term of their surrender. It is quite shocking, and we then see the funeral of Nagakado and the monks leading the cremation. Toranaga watches alone from atop his castle walls, and though we cannot see his face, we know that he is sad. We know that he is feeling the weight of this moment. This brings us to Mariko talking to Ochiba's sister. They discuss Toranaga being the grandfather, and I really feel like I'm missing something in this equation, if I can be honest, but they mainly talk about Ochiba's intentions and how hard she can be to read. Something I want to highlight is that at the start of the series, Ochiba was in Edo after Toranaga had her taken there. The council thought it was to, essentially assure his safety while they were about to vote him out of office, but he assured otherwise. Part of me really wonders what kind of plotting she was doing while in Edo, and when exactly this crusade against Toranaga actually started, whether it's real or, if it started during her time in Edo, like maybe they came up with this plan to overthrow the corruption that was the Council of Regents, by making Lord Ishido go hard against Toranaga while she seemingly namelessly pulls the strings from behind. I'm not exactly sure, but the inclusion of her sister and the additional lineage of her family line that was not formed by the great Taiko forcing her to bear his child, it really makes me wonder if she's going to kill her other child, Yachio, and end that family line, because like this one is mixed with Toranaga somehow. Like he is the grandfather, and I'm not exactly sure how, but we know that is a fact here. And my goodness, I love Ochiba so much. Like theory crafting about her is so layered. This may be incredibly terrible of me to say, but I really do hope that she kills Yachio. Like the drama, the tension, how Toranaga reacts, if he actually cares about this kid at all. Marvelous storytelling. Marvelous storytelling, which then brings us to Buntaro entering and offering to make her tea. It was a brief moment designed to show his attempt to connect and tease the idea of them making something work in this hour of desperation. I want to dive into that right now, but first we see John getting by in this new city that he may want to call home at some point. Father Martin comes in and offers some help, to which John is very happy to speak up for himself and ask for charcoal instead of firewood. It is glorious, and even the father is impressed. The father then disses John, telling him that technically a Hatamoto would be inside of the walls. It's curious that the father knows that John has been cut loose, but this is to show exactly what the father will be bringing back to Osaka. John brings up reconnecting with his crew and then going after them in the black ship. The father then brings up his clothes, starting the feeling that perhaps his men will not accept who John is. And this is when Father Martin and Mariko are discussing Toranaga's health, and we see him for the first time. The conversation is another front to shape what is being sent back to Osaka, but Toranaga honors the deal and lets them build the church here. Seeing as the church is being built next to the whorehouse and he does not trust the faith at all, it's really not clear if he intends to honor this or if he is just lying to the group that continues to occupy his territory. Mariko being of faith and the population at large also being of faith may make it difficult to remove Christianity entirely should he actually want that, but I do think that I don't know if he wants that. I think he just wants to get rid of the corruption and may just allow the churches to exist. During this conversation, Mariko is told to speak for Father Martin. It's literally the moment when your sibling says that they aren't talking to you, and then you're both talking to mom about what you want to say to the other. Mariko becomes the middleman for this conversation, as the church is not his ally, and he does not want him speaking their language. The father says that Ochiba's hate for Toranaga is what makes her control Lord Ishido, and we get this shot of Toranaga repeating it back. It feels real tongue-in-cheek, like they are really trying to sell this narrative of them being at odds, even though this person who is observing this situation has no idea why. The rest of the conversation feels like a tense debate of wills on your first watch, the church giving an option for him to ally with Ochiba and turn against Lord Ishido as a way out of this. Hiromatsu even agrees, but then Toranaga basically says that it's impossible, but offers no further explanation, just that she would never trust him in 1,000 years. Again, on first watch, this feels so tense, like they're really exploring ways out of this. On second watch, it just feels like a play, like Hiromatsu and Toranaga acting out this brilliant moment for them to really be contemplating this decision in front of their enemy, which I think is just the church at this point. We know that the corruption has existed for decades, that 2 regents are bought by the church. They are building a secret base in Macau that we've never addressed yet, and now the church sits before them, offering them guidance. If this entire plot between Toranaga and Ochiba is a facade so that the church does not see their swift attack coming their way, dear God, yes. Oh my God. How cool would that be? Also, Toranaga's friend and mentor, the great Taiko, assuming that's actually what they were, was the great unifier. He wanted peace. He knew Toranaga could not be the only regent, as the others would form against him. If this entire thing ends with Toranaga actually finding a way for the leaders of Japan to have unity again, and that comes in the form of kicking out the Christians who still only look at Japan as a way to fill their pockets, 10 out of 10. Also, God damn, there's so many ways that they could make this legendary. And Hiromatsu is ordered to get all of Toranaga's loyalists to sign a letter agreeing to cooperate during their surrender, and then Toranaga tells the father about the church and only requests that he reports back all that he sees here. Now, this line was everything. I knew right away, if this episode didn't, announce it or dive into it, which it does, I was about to overthink this line until I proved, Toranaga's entire plan. It is really straightforward for Toranaga, and Hiromatsu then tells his people that they're going to fight. On first watch, it really was quite uncertain if this was wishful thinking or not, but knowing what happens, this was really Hiromatsu trying to tell their team to not give up hope, to read in between the lines where their great lord writes his notes, which, dear God, brings us to Mariko and Buntaro meeting for tea. Oh, what to say? Oh my God. Firstly, I want to say, okay, I said it right at the start. If you're ever shown a character that is meant to just be universally hated, there's always a reason behind it. Buntaro is a complicated man. He is a complicated man, and I have no issue saying that after this episode, I feel for this dude. He does this neat little display of what probably felt like femininity to him, and says that it is only reserved for his wife. Much like a straight man and pegging, he is making himself vulnerable to his woman. And it does not work. It really felt like it was going to, like he was trying to show a lighter side of himself. And in the moments where death feels close, he was considering the life that he could have had if he wasn't so harsh and was trying to make himself, more vulnerable. That's when we're reminded of the culture and offers to grant her the wish of death, and he will take his life alongside her. Shocking, right? And then it gets more shocking. And then we see the coldest scene in the history of television.
お前様が私に許さなかったのは死ではござりませぬ。お前様には手の届かぬ。
She hates this man and has hated this man since she saw him and was forced to marry him. The ice that he has felt his entire life with her has never been more real, and I don't give a fuck what anybody says. Nobody deserves this treatment. This is pure evil. This is literally evil. Mean for the sake of being mean. It makes me question this character entirely, and if she isn't actually the assassin that has been waiting her entire life for the single kill, like she described the Society of Amida doing some episodes ago. I mean, this is venom, and much like the arrows being shot past her face, these words are doing real damage to this person. It is heartbreaking, and Buntaro feels that, feels death and defeat around every corner, and dear God, again, so good. Also, this little room feels like it was something special, but I don't know what it's called. If anybody does, let me know in the comments below. It felt like this was kind of like a separate special room for some reason, I'm not sure. But back in John's story, we see him approach his old crew, their smell offending him when it once upon a time wouldn't have. He then sees Solomon and thinks better of discussing anything with a drunken Englishman, which is a pretty good policy, but he gets stopped. Only 6 of them remain, and they do not wish to go anywhere else. Solomon questions if they really needed to come all of this way, and it's information that would be inside of the journals that John now has. They were forced here because of the Spanish ships surrounding them, and they suffered because of that call. In his absence, and probably after hearing that he was promoted and thriving, they gossiped about the conditions in which they came to suffer. It would be kind of interesting if John truly did lie to get them there, though if I am very direct here, this plot feels like a lesser than plot. Like, I really don't care compared to everything else. Though at the same time, if John did lie to get them there, and like all of these men's lives were the sacrifice in which John came to exist, that would give their lives meaning in a similar way of the gardener to Hiramatsu. And it would maybe also teach John a lesson in terms of like, you know, his story. Anyway, they get into a fight and John wins, being pulled off by a Japanese man that doesn't wish to see him get hurt or get in trouble. John leaves behind his shirt, saying that he is filthy. It is a line meant to remind us of John first arriving at Ajiro. Now, he sees them as the disgusting barbarians that Omi once pulled from his ship. This brings us to John begging Yabushige and Omi to take him in and let him sail under their banner. They refuse, Omi reminding his elder first that the request is disgraceful. Yabushige then details that their lord has a plan and that John is unwise to doubt that, which is exactly why Hiramatsu needed to die to sell this. Toranaga knows that Yabushige is a fence sitter, Omi as well, but perhaps still redeemable and definitely not to the extent of Yabushige. Like, if the snakes in his own grass believe that he is still mowing the lawn, perhaps the snakes at the other end believe it too. John then offers his blade, telling them that he does not belong there, and does not feel like he belongs with his Nakama either. Shout out One Piece. He pleads again for their help, and it is a heartfelt moment of John being vulnerable that ultimately ends in a resounding no. Mariko tries to educate him on loyalty, and John replies about suicide being senseless. It is 1,000% meant for Mariko, and John was referencing the moment where he learned that every year she asks for death. Twice now, this episode, he has tried to make her aware that he is still thinking about her, but is once again talking to the ice that was not felt until her husband returned. It really feels like Mariko wants to be with John, but I certainly do not know if that will ever be possible. We then come to Lady Jin, my future wife, discussing the land that she has received for her new tea houses. Last video I talked about how this could all relate to spy things, and I will link that video above. Yep, right there, that little button right there, click that, boom, you're good to go. Just so we don't have to go over everything again. I really enjoyed seeing Lady Kiku talk to Omi about her loyalty to Lady Jin. It really feels like this was the moment that swayed him, showed him that he may view her life of commitment to this woman as lesser, but she certainly does not. She takes pride in it. Omi does ask if loyalty could ever be a disservice or even harmful, and it was a perfect TLDR about how he is feeling about everything. A few months ago, I really started noticing that many of my friends are actually quite bad at enabling each other. Like, someone will say something about a date that they went on, and then everybody else is just suddenly shitting on men, right? I was left realizing that I could either be loyal to them or I could be a good friend and challenge their behavior as problematic. If I were to remain loyal to them, I would enable their behavior, and that is what Omi is feeling right now. He believes the route that Toranaga is taking is problematic, and he questions if his silence will enable bad behavior to continue. He wonders if he could be loyal to a fault, and perhaps he considers that a truly good friend or vassal would speak up even when others do not. In this culture, however, the purpose is that loyalty does not come with limitations, specifically in the older generations, as well as we're seeing like kind of a difference between the changing of the guards here, that it is all about the blind faith to your lord, which then brings us to the church seeing their plot of land. The father does not seem happy to be next to Lady Jin, which, good, don't look at my woman. Then we see Osaka, where the former Taiko's wife is having a stroke. It was very unexpected, and if this was not a foul play, I would be shocked. Oh my goodness. Like, This entire conversation felt like she was trying to plea for her to continue the legacy of her husband and stop the games. She leaves this earth with a note saying, "Look at what I've made." It is heartbreaking, and they are trying to highlight that they have made this woman into a beast that she is today by drugging her, by forcing her to bear her husband's children, and everything. I watched this scene and saw her reaction quickly shift, and I was so worried that the next thing that we were about to see would be Yachio's death or being poisoned or something. Instead, we return to Edo in the fated meeting of Toranaga's vassals. At the start of this, when Yabushige signs, it still carries that feeling of loyalty versus enabling, and he is going along with a plan that he fully believes is a ploy. And it isn't until the samurai guarding the city speak up does that ever actually get addressed. That is when the real ones, working for Toranaga's best interests, show up. They outright say that they are responsible to advise, and they will not enable him to make a bad choice, that they will advise even if it is unpopular, which to me is the benchmark of the friends that you want around you in society and business in feudal Japan. In the light of being true friends, they are doing what must be done, even if it comes at the cost of their life. But it's also about the idea of everybody believes that this is a plot, and now that they are in their own private spaces with all of the people involved, it's not being talked about, right? They can't just accept that he is giving up and refusing to sign the terms of service that would affirm their own death until they know what the play is here. But that's, of course, where loyalty comes in. And as we know, this needed to happen, and it needed to be big. Toranaga does not want a fight in his city because it is the future of Japan. And that is when Hiromatsu speaks. This was truly, good God, one of the most heartbreaking and uncertain moments ever. Watching this for the first time, I really thought Hiromatsu had lost his way and was losing his life for foolish pride that wouldn't let him bend the knee to his superior. They formed Toranaga into a beast that would sooner kill his closest friend and confidant than fight any longer. And it was everything that it needed to be. I cried watching this scene, and then even rewatching it and writing this now, I have tears in my eyes. Hiromatsu is the realest one and the blueprint for loyalty, and now we can only pray that his sacrifice afforded Toranaga the edge that he needed. The defenders of the city try to reason with Toranaga and say that giving up is the treacherous thing, betraying his heritage and all that have died to get to this point, which is right, which is a fact that needed to be silenced. So Hiromatsu yells for the room to be quiet. He says that this is between the two of them, between Hiromatsu and his only friend in the entire world. Toranaga watches as everything plays out and tries to keep his composure while this person he most certainly loved pleads for his life. We see Buntaro fighting to keep it together while his father is about to kill himself, and we know that Buntaro was considering suicide earlier today. It is an emotional landscape. Hiromatsu whispers his final goodbye and bows to his friend, then calls for his son to second him. Buntaro goes over and immediately offers to join him, to which Hiromatsu commands him to keep living and to not lose faith in their lord. He says that he will know what it is to be denied, which, bro, can this man get a break? My God, this point was rather hard for me to wrap my head around at first, but after some rewrites and re-records, I think I got it. Last episode, we saw the death of Nagakado and the absence of beauty from dying in battle like that, as highlighted by the words coming from his uncle. Choosing when you die is much better than not, because you control the story and feel honor in that bravery. I feel like Buntaro and or Mariko are headed for a tragic death to further highlight what it means to be denied, suicide, and how much better it would have been if they died surrounded by their loved ones or when they chose it specifically. And I think that that's ultimately the purpose of denying him here. The sword enters his belly. Buntaro is quick to remove his head, reducing the amount of suffering as much as possible. This will be the best scene in the entire show, this entire sequence. I have no doubt about it. And then we see Mariko talking to Toranaga. He stands by his falcon that symbolizes his cunning, and I knew right away that we were about to get some real talk between these two. They have a quick poetry rap battle, and Mariko pieces him up. He then questions if Jean went to see Yabushige yet, and she says that he refused Jean's advances, meaning that the reason that he put him on the outskirts and pushed him away since the death of his son was for a purpose. Yabushige, after today, will be taking John up on his plan to go to his boat and do something. Hopefully rain fire on Osaka, but I doubt that is Yabushige's plan. It is then revealed that Hiromatsu's death had a purpose, amongst other things, and he gave his life to help Toranaga control the falcons around him, bringing back the analogy that he told Nagakado. Toranaga sheds a tear for his old friend, and we hear outright that Osaka needed to believe that his defeat was real, asking Mariko if she was ready for her duty, much like Hiromatsu just served his. It is a terrifying line, seeing as how he just died, but I think the intention here is to have Mariko travel to Osaka and speak with Ochiba. I believe we may get the scene again with them as adults, and perhaps one will indeed stab the other in the back like I talked about. This would be pretty dang awesome. Also, something we may see when they meet in Osaka, should Ochiba and Toranaga not be working together as like this 8D chess game to rid Japan of Christianity, is that Ochiba may be trying to convince Mariko to go against Toranaga, as he was the one that convinced her father to give his life and the life of all of his family, except for her, by killing Ochiba's father. They could create some nice suspense here, as we don't know who Mariko would be loyal to after hearing her friend give additional perspective to this man that keeps having people die for causes that benefit him. And we just have to believe that he's being a good guy. Also, again, I've said this a couple times, if this actually is just his plan to get the throne back and be a shogun, ooh, also great. We then see a silent Ochiba reflecting on the moment and giving Lord Ishido papers that probably highlight her desire to get married. She then bows before him. This action is no different than Toranaga asking his own general to take his life to create the conditions that benefit him. She, much like he, is playing these cards close to her chest. We then see a hastened Yabushige leaving with John, and Omi trying to warn against it. Omi sees his uncle's true colors here, and I really wish they would have included a line about his uncle not showing up when his brother died, that, like we heard this from his mother a few episodes ago. It really feels like that would have been another big point to show that he truly just does not care about anybody but himself, and Omi is not, he's not that dude. He doesn't need to be that dude. He shouldn't honor him as he does. John and Yabushige have a little heart-to-heart, though the term ally is really the only thing that gets across. Mariko then appears and joins them on their trip to Osaka, showing them that Toranaga knew this entire time, and ooh, I cannot wait to see that. Finally, we see Toranaga, who goes to his son's funeral site and thanks both him and Hiromatsu for the time that they have afforded him. The episode ends with what I believe is the first confirmation of Toranaga's religion when he does the single-handed prayer. I believe this is a Buddhist mudra, which is just a gesture that can have great meaning and symbolism behind it, such as strength or fearlessness. Unfortunately, when I was looking, I wasn't really able to find this pose, and I'm not well versed in Buddhist anything. But he is visiting the funeral site for his son, and again, the procession was Buddhist. We've also seen plenty of Christians dying, and the issuing of last rites is kind of a requirement. And we didn't see that. This one dude died doing this for a stranger that he believed worshipped the same Jesus. We didn't see that in this ceremony, and to me, this feels like Toranaga is just working for a cause that remains deep in his third heart years in the past, and it relates to some underlying plot of Christianity invading Ochiba's father, inexplicably killing Buddhists all those years ago. And with that, we come to the end of the video. Thank you so much, everyone who stayed to this point. Thank you for watching to the end. It really helps the YouTube algorithm god decide my fate, as does liking, commenting, and subscribing. We will also be covering the new Fallout series this week, and I hope all of you will watch that with me too, as it has the people that brought us Westworld working on it as well. Shout out to everybody that supports me over on Patreon. See the description below if you want to join in on that fun as well. Also, I am on Twitter. Follow me over on Twitter at HaxDogma. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.